It's no longer a secret that one of the major goals of the BRICS alliance is dethroning the dollar. Since 2022, after the US freezed all Russia's assets as a result of the Russian l-Ukrainian war, Russia, together with other members of the BRICS group, has been pushing the de-dollarization campaign to ensure that the dominance of the dollar is completely eliminated, and also to reduce the economic power and weapon of the US in terms of sanctioning other countries that do not fall in line with its agenda. As part of the de-dollarization campaign, BRICS have been encouraging countries around the world to ditch the dollar and use local currencies for international trade. And guess what? A lot of countries, including India, China, Egypt, and Iran, have adopted this policy. However, BRICS, with Russia at its head, has decided to take the de-dollarization campaign a notch higher. This time, BRICS wants to destroy the powerhouse of the dollar. Have you ever asked yourself, why is it that the dollar is the most dominant currency in the world? Why is it the top currency used in bilateral trade? What gives the dollar so much dominance? The answer to these questions is what we mean by the powerhouse of the dollar, and that is the PetroDollar economy. It is this economy that BRICS plans to destroy, and if it happens, will cripple the dominance and the hegemony of the dollar. So, what is the PetroDollar economy? What will happen to the dollar if the PetroDollar economy is destroyed? Let's find out. On the 17th of March 2024, Russian President Vladimir Putin said that if oil producers in the Middle East stop using the US dollar, it will be the end of the dollar. Putin's statement says a whole lot that we are about to uncover. But most importantly, it reveals the step taken by BRICS to shut down the powerhouse of the dollar. Before we talk more on the move made by BRICS, let's first talk about the PetroDollar economy and how it lowers the US dollar's dominance in international trade. In simple terms, the petrodollar is the commitment or agreement made by Saudi Arabia as the leader of the Middle East and the second largest oil producer in the world to conduct all oil trade in dollars. You can also see it as the deal made by Saudi Arabia to use dollar revenues from oil sales to the United States to buy US treasuries. Let's dive deeper. During the early 1970s, the United States was beset by high inflation and large current account deficits amid an ongoing war in Vietnam, putting downward pressure on the dollar and threatening a run on US gold reserves. This was during the Nixon administration. In 1971, the United States ended the dollar's convertibility to gold, which had been the linchpin of the Bretton Woods international monetary system of fixed exchange rates. Then, in 1973, major currencies began to float against each other. Added to this was the oil shock when the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, cut oil production and embargoed shipments to the United States during the Yom Kippur War. Against this backdrop of great economic uncertainty, the US decided to embark on a diplomatic mission to Saudi Arabia. The mission was to cement an economic partnership with Saudi Arabia, which has been the central to the global energy trade. During the mission, the US encouraged Saudi Arabia to use the dollar as the medium of exchange for its oil sales, which will funnel those dollars back to the Treasury bond market to help the US fiscal deficits. In return, the US promised to supply military equipment to Saudi Arabia and protect its national security. Surprisingly, despite the uncertainty and instability in the United States at the time, Saudi Arabia agreed to the deal and the dollar started to gain its dominance. In addition to keeping demand for the dollar stable, the agreement promoted its use in oil and commodities trading, while creating a steady source of demand for US treasuries. As you can imagine, this helped to strengthen the dollar's position as the world's key reserve, financing, and transactional currency. So, you can see how the dollar became the dominant currency. Now, instead of focusing on its economy and minding its business, since it gained dominant status, the US has used its dominance in international trade as a weapon and political tool to enforce its ideas and principles around the world. And any country that seems to have a different idea is shunned, its leader tagged a dictator, and the country is sanctioned. As we already said, the sanction is very effective because the reserve currency of the world is the dollar. A lot of countries, including China and Russia, as well as several African countries, have suffered as a result of these sanctions. Not only did the U.S. economic dominance allow it to sanction other countries' economies, it also allowed it to break international laws with no consequences. One bone of contention between members of BRICS and the creator of the current global system is the hypocrisy of the United States, which has manifested over and over again through continuous violations of international law and their use of violence. In 2003, the Bush administration invaded Iraq. However, that invasion was a violation of the basic tenets of the Security Council, which set a precedent that state sovereignty was only applicable to states that consented to the LEIO. In the 1980s, the United States ignored the verdict of the International Court of Justice to pay reparations to Nicaragua for illegally mining its harbors. These are, however, just a few examples of how the United States has violated international laws and committed crimes against humanity, all in the name of protecting their interests. Yet the United States has never been sanctioned for it, and neither has it paid for it. All these while, lots of countries have raged at the hegemony of the US, but not much has been done about it until the recent sanction against Russia by the United States. Following its invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the United States exercised its economic power again and imposed stringent sanctions on Russia. The US freezed Russia's reserve currency, which is the dollar, restricted its key imports, and locked the country out of the SWIFT international banking system. Since the sanctions were imposed, Russia has been reeling under severe economic pressure as the inflow of funds through direct trade has dried up. But the sanctions made countries around the world begin to realize that if it could happen to Russia, then it could also happen to them. So, the push for destroying the dominance of the dollar began to intensify. Russia has been at the forefront of this campaign, and as we said earlier in this video, Russia intends to take the de-dollarization campaign a step further. As we also said earlier, the powerhouse of the US is the PetroDollar economy, so if that is destroyed, the dominance of the dollar will be crippled. Given this, Russia has called for countries in the Middle East to stop accepting the US dollar for oil payments. He has urged oil-producing countries, including BRICS nations Egypt and the UAE, to not accept the US dollar for oil payments. According to President Putin, the Middle East has the power to end the US dollar's global dominance through oil and gas. This is why he said that if oil producers in the Middle East stop using the US dollar, it will be the end of the dollar. Not surprisingly, there has been numerous speculations that BRICS inducted oil-producing countries into the alliance last year to push the de-dollarization agenda, and this is very true. As you recall, Saudi Arabia started this whole petrodollar deal, and this is why the BRICS group extended an invitation to Saudi Arabia to join the alliance. Currently, however, Saudi Arabia is still weighing its options on whether or not to join the alliance. The kingdom is currently looking to boost its economy beyond the oil and gas segment, so it is weighing its options for being a part of the bloc and has yet to conclude its decision. Although Saudi Arabia has started testing using other currencies for its oil trade, Saudi Arabia's willingness to diversify the currencies used in selling its oil aligns with a larger strategy that requires the country to increase its international relations beyond the United States and Europe. This means that it is possible that Saudi Arabia might ditch the dollar in its oil trade, and if this happens, all other OPEC countries would follow suit, leading to a fall in the dominance of the dollar. However, is it realistic for the Middle East to abandon the dollar for its oil trade right now? The answer is not clear, at least for now, for a couple of reasons. Saudi Arabia, for instance, is looking towards diversifying its economy beyond oil, and one area it's looking into is tourism. The kingdom is now opening up the country to tourism and needs the help of the US, Europe, and the West. So, given this, it's possible that Saudi might not ditch the dollar for its trade. In addition to this, the US dollar is currently the world's reserve currency, which means it provides a level of stability that local currencies cannot match for transactions. Sometimes transactions conducted in local currency lead to loss because of lack of stability and reliability. And, given that most Middle Eastern countries rely heavily on the dollar, severing ties with the dollar can undermine their financial stability and lead to a decline in their GDP. However, this doesn't mean that ditching the dollar can't still be done. It may not happen now, but it might happen in the future, because the fact is, even the Middle Eastern countries are fed up with the hegemony of the US. What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments section below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video.